Hello, dear one. Welcome to Love M podcast. My name is Marta, and I am a continuous student of life. In my nearly 4 decades of life, I wore a few hats, from a fashion model to a yoga teacher, nutrition coach, transformational game guide, and now a podcaster. But my true passion lies in the evolution of the human soul. On this podcast, I sit down with beautiful human beings from all walks of life to witness real-life testimonies of love, truth, and faith. My hope is that both you and I can learn and evolve from it. Now let's get to it. Enjoy! Hello, everybody. I have today here with me Amánda ARGOT. Amánda is a mental health advocate, keynote speaker, and storyteller, and weaver of traditions, technologies, and communities. Her mission is to help people reconnect to themselves, to others, and to nature with integrity and purpose. Amánda, hi.
Hi, Marta.
Thank you for being here. I'm so happy to have you.
Yes, thank you.
Amánda, I am so curious about your story. Would you please tell us about what you do? What do you do? What is your thing?
Yeah, so I am someone who's deeply passionate about working with our altered states of consciousness, and with that, integrating them and making them meaningful in our lives. So I'm somebody who's been on a deeply personal healing journey, personal transformation journey for many, many years. And it began in my early 20s. And since then, I've really been devoted to helping people achieve more purpose, more meaning, more joy and abundance with these altered states of consciousness, namely with psychedelic medicines and other forms of altered states. And so a little bit of what I do is I help people on that journey, whether it's the ecosystem of facilitators, guides, therapists, coaches, or it's organizations and retreat centers that are hosting these containers of transformation, whatever those might be. And I'm also serving the general public and the broader public who are asking me to come and to speak around this new era of psychedelics. It's often a trendy conversation lately, and to give the right information about these substances and how they work and how we can work with them with more integrity and sustainability.
Wow, thank you for your little introduction. I personally, I don't want to say a fan, but I want to say that I am familiar to this medicine. I myself have been on a similar journey as you were, and I have also used psychedelic medicine as a tool for mind transformation. And as you said, to achieve a better, happier, more purposeful life. And I can say it's been a very potent, powerful medicine. And I guess we also want to say that while many people are intrigued these days to try this medicine because I guess it's gaining popularity. Is that would that statement be true? It's
Yes.
gaining popularity around the world, but I guess we want to say that we should be attending this question with care. And Amánda, I want to ask you so many questions about this tool because I respect this medicine so much. But before I get into all these questions about the medicine and the mechanics of how it works, I would love to know what initiated you on this journey. What is your story?
Yeah, so these plant medicines, specifically plant-based medicines, entered my world around 8-9 years ago. I was suffering from a mental illness, bouts of depression and anxiety, and I was a walking pharmacy of sorts, a product of the American pharmaceutical system. I'm originally from Brazil, but I grew up in the United States, and at the time when I was suffering, it was really just trying to treat the symptoms of what I was feeling, which is incredibly low and uninspired. And also I would have panic attacks, and there was this roller coaster of emotions. But instead of working through the symptoms, instead of working through the root causes, rather, I was just treating the symptoms with these pharmaceutical drugs. And it was around about 5-6 years into taking these types of medicines that I came upon a community that was doing things a bit differently. They were working with meditation, with yoga, with different forms of altered states, personal development. They were seeking something beyond the ordinary. And it was them that introduced me to plant medicines. And it was through this community that I actually worked with plant medicines for the first time. And that really opened a door for me. It allowed me to look through and see where it was that I was actually, what was hurting me, what I was suffering from, and to have that empowerment within me to take charge and to heal. And so it doesn't, these medicines, these psychedelic ceremonies that I was doing, by no means was it curing or making me all of a sudden an enlightened being from one day to another. But in fact, it really allowed me to explore the depths of myself with more compassion and more care. And that was the beginning of a journey that lasted a couple of many years. And of course, the journey is ongoing. And I was able to stop taking these antidepressants and these benzodiazepines and actually work through my own mental states on my own. And so the power of these substances really stuck with me. And that's how I started to work with them now in a professional capacity. And immediately, I believe it was a bit too early, perhaps, to talk about this with the wider public. Now, as you say, it's really a popular topic, and people are gaining more awareness. Perhaps even the stigma has been reduced around working with these drugs, so to speak, these now called medicines. But back then it was a bit too early to really share publicly about my experience. And so I went back into the tech startup world and was working in product management. But there was something there in the back of my mind that said, I really need to do something about this. This is where my purpose is. And that's when I went to study. I went back to university to do my master's degree in neuroscience. And I studied the effects of psilocybin together with psychotherapy. Fast forward a few years after that, I was working in the investment space in the psychedelics sector, working with a company that made investments into psychedelic therapy and from a drug development side, but also the tech infrastructure to support these medicines. And now I work with my own company, INTEGRA, specifically to support integration. So that's a little bit of the origins.
That is so cool. I love how you say, I think it's very important what you said when you said it's not the cure, but it's the tool that will show you, that will make you see. And I can relate. A couple years ago on my journey, I've been using psychedelic medicines. And while I was always very careful and coming to this experiences intentionally, I can say that what you're doing was always missing in my experience. The integration, which I now understand, that is a very important, the most important, would you say, the most important part of the journey was missing from my experiences. And so it's been several years since my first experience, and I keep coming back there and still trying to comprehend. Or it's more like it's unfolding as I am evolving. My mind is evolving and I'm opening up, but I keep going back there. I keep understanding it deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So I'm a big fan of the medicine. And I would like to ask you, as a specialist now, if I am someone, people are curious, right? If I am someone who is thinking about trying the medicine. And I don't know how to go about it, or what should I try, or if it's suitable for me. What would you say to me? What would you recommend to me?
Yeah, that's a great question. And also, I would offer that, we're referencing medicines, we say plant medicine. Not everyone, that's also a term that we place on it because it is being, a lot of these substances are now being studied and are in clinical trial as a use for medicine for different mental health indications, but also to keep that term broader and to not try and place any kind of dogma around what it is that these are. I can also just call them these psychedelic substances. I wouldn't call them drugs nor medicine, right? And there is this little nuance there in the word.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly, where if someone asks me, they want to look at working with these substances or entering these psychedelic states for the first time, this is obviously a very deeply personal journey. And so I would say, before anything else, these are not for everyone and for every moment. There are some people where it's not recommended that they work with these substances for a number of reasons. One of them might be they might have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, or a history of such in their family, a history of psychosis in their immediate family, because sometimes there are cases where these substances are known to activate those psychotic states that are otherwise dormant in people who may not even be aware. And so we're still studying this, and it's just to, really put that disclaimer that I'm in no way, shape, or form saying that everyone should be trying these, and they should certainly consult with somebody before doing so based on their own medical history. And aside from that, we're really so eager to seek these altered states and to go right to that peak, go right to the top of the mountain. And especially when we hear from our friends or we see in the news anecdotally, wow, how transformational, look at these aha moments, this big bang, essentially. But honestly, before we go there, it's not, first of all, it's not even a guarantee that you're going to get to that state from the start, because there has to be an openness and an intention before entering into that kind of container. I've met people who side by side take the exact same substance at the exact same time and dosage, and one person is having the trip of their lives and the other person barely feels a thing. What can be accounted for that? There's so many reasons. And for many of us, it might simply be just the lack of preparation and openness for something that they have no idea that could even happen to them. They've never experienced anything like this. And I often suggest people, before even working with these substances, to take a look at what they're doing in their lives that are non-substance induced, but still reach these altered states. Do you have a very deep meditation practice already, a regular one? Are you already comfortable with silence, with sitting with your emotions, with sitting with the thoughts that come and then they go? Have you tried other kinds of modalities like breath work, where you're induced into a state where you no longer have control over your body or your hands and your toes? Sometimes people reach these very intense breathwork experiences where they have to truly experience that feeling of letting go. Do you have fear around what might happen to you? Do you have fear of not coming back? Do you have fear of this ego death? Do you feel safe in this process? These are all really important questions to ask before you even consider working with any kind of altered state experience that is with a substance that will naturally be propelling you into those states with very little time between, right? So we can gear ourselves up to feeling comfortable with that notion of letting go, of being open, of having a curiosity to what comes, to receiving without judgment what might happen to us or what we might be visualizing or hallucinating. We feel comfortable with what might happen afterwards with the integration. We have a support system of people that we can go to, that we can share about the fact that we're going through these experiences. We have perhaps a therapist that's aware of what the intention is and how to best support you after. You have all the tools in place. It's really about preparing you and making sure that you're ready for what comes after, all before we even enter into a psychedelic experience. And that's something that I think the more that these substances are coming into the mainstream, the more that we need to be really speaking about more vocally, as opposed to just sharing the straight the straight facts and figures and anecdotes of trip experiences. And, we have our journeys that we really like to exclaim, and we reach these mystical states. That's all well and good, but the preparation is really very, very important, as is being ready for an integration.
Mm. Amánda, is it true that if I don't think it through very well and I go into these experiences, and perhaps maybe several times, and I go there for, I'd say, for the fun of it? It's not always fun, but for the fun of it, I mean, because I will have a story to tell, like you said. Is it true that somehow it can maybe even get you even more lost or further away from where you were initially wanted to go with all of this?
So there isn't anything inherently wrong or bad around wanting to work with these substances from a recreational standpoint. Many of these, we have so much fun. We can bring us a lot of joy and open-heartedness. We're with friends. If we're in this, if we have a safe container, if we feel comfortable, we're doing so with responsibility and respect towards these substances in a more curious mindset or recreational context. These substances can be very beneficial. However, again, it's about the intention. And so when you ask if people have this potential to get lost, do they have any intention at all? Or are they really just seeking, constantly seeking without any direction? And that's just a mirror of what's happening in their life, regardless of the psychedelic. Are they in seeking of these moments? Are they going from one festival or party to another, or one dinner with friends to another, night after night, without spending a single moment with themselves or their loved ones at home? How much are they actually escaping from their ordinary reality in all the little ways? That translates to a behavior of working with substances like psychedelics, where that's amplified. And naturally, yes, if you're already entering that space without direction or without care or consideration, then these substances may not provide what you're actually really looking for at the end of the day, because we're not integrating it. We're just in a constant seeking and expansion without allowing us to come back to ourselves after it.
That's what's funny. Sometimes you hear numbers like some people had, for example, over 100 ayahuasca ceremonies. And I wonder how or why would somebody do that many, keep coming back to do that many? And isn't that why integration part is so important, so that you don't have to go into 100 ayahuasca ceremonies?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned before how for you, you were integrating and you were allowing this unfolding for your evolution. And it's a gradual unfolding, and real integration takes time. It's organic. And we have an incredible window of opportunity when we reach these peak experiences. It's a small window of opportunity. It can be minutes to hours, maybe days, of having this peak moment. And that over time, once that moment ends, our ability to transform those insights, those aha moments, and to synthesize those experiences to make real meaningful changes, they diminish over time. So we have that opportunity while we're in a peak state to actually transform them into something real and expansive in our ordinary state. And so if we're not doing that in the moment, if we're not prepared to integrate while we're in the journey itself, then yeah, what could happen is we can go from one experience, one journey to another, very little time in between. we start to depend on being in that state in order to make any critical decisions, because we've lost the ability to do that on our own. We haven't practiced the actual gifts that these substances can give us, which is to have our own medicine within us. At the end of the day, what I really like to say is integration teaches us that the medicine is actually within you. It's not in the drugs themselves. That's something that we like to think of when we're told that, just like we're told in the West that a drug or a medicine or a pill is going to help you make your headache go away, or which in many cases it does on a physical level. But from a mental health perspective, these pills or these medicines that I took for my anxiety and my depression didn't make it go away. It just relieved my symptoms. And so in the same way, we can be constantly revisiting these psychedelic states just to alleviate that immediate symptom of uncertainty that comes within us. But what integration does is actually put us into a position where we're actually meant to fulfill that intention that we had in the first place. It's actually the moment to do the work, to put to practice all that we've learned, and to actually have our own ability to transform our lives from within.
How does it work? Because I've never done the integration. I mean, I guess I did it somehow on my own, but I wish I would have someone like you to know how and to direct me, because I was just sort of doing
On your own.
whatever,
Yeah.
doing whatever. And so can you teach me what is it? What is it that you do? You're an integration therapist, right? So what is it? What's your job?
So what I do is I'm an integration educator, and I call myself an educator because it encompasses a few things. The first is I do coaching. So for one-on-one, for particular individuals, predominantly leaders, C-level executives, and people are in a position, entrepreneurs, of stepping up to their own professional power and navigating their personal life while they're working through their professional career. So I do coaching on that side.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other, I'm also working with facilitators, guides, coaches, therapists, anyone who's in the area of holding space for others during their psychedelic or other altered stage journeys. And I develop training and education programs to help them, guide them through integration. What are the different tools? What are the different ethical considerations? How can we practice integration on ourselves, but then impart that on our clients, on our patients? And so I do that also with consulting. So I consult retreat centers to design integration programs. So there's retreats, trainings, integration consulting, and coaching. And to answer what we do with integration, and that's really, there's a set of principles or foundational areas that I like to work with for myself. And I've developed that from my neuroscience background, from the work that I do with indigenous communities in the Amazon, from my experience personally, but also working with other facilitators and professionals in that capacity of holding space. And there are a few different principles. And one of them that I really truly start with is this element of responsibility. And so in the same way, we have a responsibility when we are choosing what type of experience we want to have, what type of medicine we want to take, or substance, in what context we are making that decision. It has a gravitas, it has a weight there. There is something that we're doing that is beyond the ordinary life. It's not as simple as just going to the supermarket and picking a different fruit than typical, right? So we have a responsibility for working with these medicines and these substances. And in that same way, it's our responsibility to integrate and to take the care afterwards. So many of us, and this is what I design for often with retreat centers and with the facilitators that I work with, we're thinking only about the experience itself. So we're designing a Oftentimes there might be a little bit of preparation and onboarding, very little, but it's there. And then there's this 3, 4, 5, 6 day experience or retreat. It doesn't have to just be an ayahuasca ceremony, but this is a vipassana or a yoga teacher training or yoga retreat or a breath work and transformational experience, whatever it might be. We're really focused on the experience itself. And so what is our responsibility as space holders, as providers of that service, to help guide people in the right direction for integration? And then what is that personal responsibility as journeyers, in the same way that we're looking at these experiences with set, setting, and substance, set being the mindset, the intention, setting being where we are, what is the actual space that we're in, the substance that we take such time and care to choose what substance might be right for us, at what dosage, and what container. Then we also need to think about the aftercare. What is it that comes next? And so that's a really important pillar, that we keep that responsibility to ourselves and to the people that we're servicing if we are in a space holder capacity. Another element that I really feel is necessary is rest. And people always ask me, what do I do after I go through a transformative experience? What comes next? And, you know, this is one of the hardest things for us to do in the aftermath, is do nothing, is to take time to rest.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you're laughing because it's almost obvious, but it's so challenging, because also we're trained to want to go and do and be active. It's this like Western masculine go paradigm where we're not, it didn't happen if we didn't do something about it right away, if we're not capitalizing on it, if we're not taking advantage, if we're not changing the world immediately. There's this energy of needing to do, and also this lack of transition time where we have had a retreat and then we need to go right back to work, and the work is usually piled up double because we took off that week before. And so there's this extreme dissonance between what we had experienced and what comes next. And so there is an element of incorporating rest in as in the most easeful way possible, in the most convenient way. Obviously, for some people, it isn't possible. But if you can take a day after the experience to really do nothing, not try and reflect right away on what happened. People ask, well, what about journaling? And I say, yes, journaling and reflection is absolutely necessary and can be extraordinarily helpful for people. But if you really want to not forget the details of what happened, just write that down, just what happened really quickly in a couple of words. Don't try and analyze it or reflect on it or think about what you're going to do with that information in the first 24 hours. Just write it down, put it away, and then let your body absorb and assimilate what happened. We can get our mind out of the way and for just a day and let that come through us. So that's another really important aspect that I like to share with people.
Oh, I wish I knew you sooner. It's been such a challenge for me, and I love that you bring it up. It's been I think I'm still learning to do nothing, because somehow, I guess, what you said, that we are conditioned to do, to go, 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 go all the time, that when I stop, or that when there are perhaps more quiet days in my life, I get anxious. And that's where my coping mechanisms kick in. And I just realized that, okay, I can't, it's extremely hard for me to do nothing. I'd go as far as to say it's scary to do nothing. Because somehow when I stop, there's this fear that everything's going to fall apart. Is this something that the skill that you had to acquire as well?
I deeply resonate with what you just said about how when you stop, there's this fear that something might fall apart, or that we're going to miss it, or it's just going to float away, and we're not going to be able to grasp what happened to us in like in a tangible, meaningful way. I really resonate. And I by no means I didn't even know what integration was when I did my first plant medicine ceremony.
Mm.
I naturally did my own version of integration because that's how it got me out of the suffering that I was in, out of that depressive and anxious state. How did I do that? It was integration. It was going back to therapy and talking about this experience and the insights that I got during that experience, and trying to weave that into the traumas and childhood memories that I had that were hurting me in the way that they were. I started to do a regular meditation practice. I was not that person before, and I realized that that was really helpful for me to regulate the coming and going of these thoughts. And also for me, it felt like a practice of doing nothing, and I was afraid of that. I was like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
I am not sure I'm ready for this 20 minutes of stillness. But it really helped me quite a lot in that way. I started working with my body more. I was getting massages. I never
Mm-hmm.
thought that that was something that could actually be an integration tool for me. I would say that's not for everyone. One person's therapeutic massage is another person's reactivation of a sexual trauma, for example. So again, there's no one correct way for integration. But for me, I felt like I needed that touch to remind me that I was meant to be back in my body and live in this body in a real, sturdy, solid way, and that I could move forward with confidence again. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying all the things that were working for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I was really drawn to this integration and really making this my focus, because I was noticing a lot of people in my community, people around me, they were not integrating. And I could just see that they were still stuck up here and floating around, and they weren't grounding. And these substances have a potential to really make you kind of float up and not find that rootedness again in such an easy
Mm-hmm.
way. And so I was really curious about different types of grounding exercises. They could be so simple, like earthing is the name of something that's really just about putting your bare feet on the grass for 15 minutes a day. Even better, lying down, belly down on the grass, just feeling the earth underneath you. What a simple yet beautiful exercise to get us literally back to earth. And so that's really what inspired me, seeing that I was going through something I had no answers to at the time. I wasn't given that framework for integration. That word didn't even really come up. There was a sharing circle, there was a transition. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the sharing circles are really important, but also not personally my most favorite form of integrating right after an experience, because I don't want to hear what else everyone's going through right away. I don't know if you've come across this when you've done your own experiences, but sometimes you just want to shut it off and be in your own space for a while.
Yeah, it can distract you because the experience keeps unfolding sometimes years after the experience, and sometimes whatever happens in there, it's very hard to comprehend. Everyone who's been through a journey like that, they experience difficulty into putting that into words, right? So how do I express whatever, wherever I went, whatever I've seen? And I guess it is very important. And there are some, if you do it properly, for example, I don't know about other substances like psilocybin or maybe LSD, but ayahuasca, if you are lucky to be in a proper setting with a good shaman, with a good curandero, they will instruct you to take that slow time for 3 days after, is it? 3 days after the experience, I think. Is
Yeah,
it true?
depending on who you're with, some people will suggest 3 days. I think in many cases, they'll suggest whatever amount you can take, right? I know
Mm-hmm.
those who go to a ceremony and the next day they're back at work. That's the unfortunate part. But taking these 3 days and also having the ability, back to this sort of, when you're in an experience and, you know, it could be maybe too much information or distracting if you're in it with a group of people, there's often a sharing circle. And that's really important for a lot of people to feel that they can voice what they're going through. They can feel that they're feeling seen and heard by others. However, it is important to know that that's always an option, and that you don't necessarily need to share the details of your experience while you're still processing it for yourself. There is such thing as maybe opting out. You can sit and you can listen, or you can kind of sit on the side, still be part of the container, but not actively engaging in it, and choosing whenever is right for you to be able to share how you feel and what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Amanda, sorry, I have a question for you. Again, if I'm somebody who's never tried it before,
Mm-hmm.
and since it's trendy right now, how do I know if the facilitator of my experience is to be trusted?
Hmm. So a big part of the preparation process for an individual is to ask the right questions and to enter into this with having a bit of doing some of the research, right? Like there is at this stage, because as you say, it's becoming such a popular experience, and a lot of people are assuming the role of facilitator or shaman or whatever role they're naming themselves as, and maybe they don't have the right experience or qualifications to do so. We have to ask those questions. It's our responsibility now as journeyers to make sure we're doing our homework first. And for plant medicine ceremonies, for example, the ones that have a bit more of a deeper ritual attached to it, if we're working with not in an originary or not in an indigenous context with these substances, and we're working with somebody who's been trained with that culture, we ask them, what is your training? Who have you learned this from? How do you know how to hold this space? Where does that experience actually come from? If you're bringing in a substance like if they're working with something like ayahuasca, which is a very special combination of two different plants to create this brew, this Amazonian brew, where does that medicine come from? Who's making it? Are you in direct contact with the people who's bringing that medicine to you? The medicine isn't just in the facilitation, it's the lineage of the actual plant, where it's come from, how it's grown, how it's made. And these are important questions to ask the facilitator. Also, asking the facilitator, who else is going to be supporting on the journey? Is it just you holding space, or are there others to be there as well? What are their qualifications? Where have they learned? Do you know them? And what are the different tools and practices that you're implementing before, or the framework of onboarding, of making sure that you're how do you call it, when you're and analyzing the person's profile, whether they're taking certain medications, whether they have a history of these mental states or psychosis in their family, etc. Is there a process there in place that they're actively participating in? Are they interviewing people essentially before, or doing an intake of their history? Do they have a support program in place afterwards? What does integration look like? These are all things that, when in asking them, you're also vetting how experienced they are, how they're answering it. Do they even have answers to these questions? Or are these not even considerations? So what's important first and foremost is that you're setting yourself up for safety. You're going into a space, whether it's a group or a private one-on-one or whatever the container might be, and you feel that there is safety in placement measurements there. And is that person the right facilitator to do that? it's sometimes really hard because there's no like formal school or training and being a, psilocybin facilitator. Yes, there is some psychedelic assisted therapy training for medical professionals, for clinicians. That's more of this sort of medicalized construct. However, that doesn't mean they're the only ones that should be facilitating these experiences. There is also the lineage, the tradition that they've been brought up to do and that they're training with.
Mm-hmm.
And just because, also, I would say, just because somebody is a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist does not make them an experienced facilitator of psychedelic states. It doesn't give them the credential to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't assume that just because they're medical or clinical professionals, that they're going to be able to hold the space for whatever might come up in that experience.
Mm-hmm. So in the end of the day, it seems like when you do your diligent work on research, and then you also listen to, okay, well, how do I feel about this?
Yeah.
Apart from the experience itself, is intense, so it might be scary, right? And it often is when you go into it for the first time. But this first initial feeling, do I like these people?
Mm-hmm.
Do they seem legit? Do they know what they talk about? How do I feel about them? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not what I always was good at. I used to just easily trust people, but don't do that, people. Please don't be me. Do your research. Ask them questions. Make sure you're in the safe hands, right? It's so important that you are in the safe hands. So all the green flags that, sorry?
And trust your intuition, as you said. I mean, how do I feel? That's a very important part.
But
Huge.
okay, the question about intuition then. I am a lot better at listening and hearing and following my intuition right now. But I'm 37 years old this day, and my intuition lives with me firmly for maybe a year. And my entire life, I feel like I've been very disconnected from my intuition. And if I am somebody like that, just disconnected with myself, how do I tell? What do I do?
Mm.
I guess I would say don't go into this experience then. Try meditation and yoga and other things first.
Funny, what comes up for me when you say that? Like, how do I know? How can I tell my intuition? We start with what we know to be sure for us. What do I know for sure? It could be as basic and as very easy as my name is Amanda. I am
Mhm.
33 years old. I live in Portugal. How does that feel in our bodies when we say truth? What does truth sound, hear, really feel like? What does it
Mhm.
feel like? And then say something that we inherently know to be untrue. That's factual, maybe. So we're not,
I
getting into
love that.
how does that feel?
It's
When
a
we
good
close our eyes,
exercise.
where does it go? Exactly. And then we start to build that intuition slowly with these small
Mhm.
steps. And then we can start to really listen. For me, for example, my intuition lives on the surface of my skin lately. It hasn't always been like this, but when something feels really resonant and real, and someone is talking to me and they say something and I say, wow, it just
Mhm.
I get goosebumps.
Mhm.
I love this because I feel it. I feel it in my body. It's like what was said is so real. And so the same, I'm not saying this is the only thing you should do, because obviously what I just said before around asking all these questions are very important. And at the end
Yeah.
of the day, is this the right thing I should be doing with this person, with this time, with this substance? See how that
Mhm.
feels, truly.
And if I have, say, health problems, not major, but maybe like if I have some GI issues, is it safe for me to try? Because after all, it's something that you have to take in and gets into your stomach. And is it safe for me if to try this if I have some GI issues?
That I can't answer that fully because it really depends on the medicine, the substance, where you're at, because often GI issues are also a result of your psychological issues. You have the second brain in your gut. So where are you mentally and emotionally? That is part of a lot of the reason why some of these are actually happening, right? So there's this, I can't say for sure. If you have GI issues, don't do it, right? It really
Yeah.
depends. But I would invite people with these issues, obviously, to take a look at that and to take care, and to see what is the like root of that, right? Where are these coming from? And then following those trails, speaking to a medical professional or the person who's holding the space. If they're masters of a substance and of facilitating that, they should know roughly how that is going to react in the body, and if there are different types of prior indications that people need to be aware of before working with it.
Hmm. Right. Amanda, I'm very curious. You mentioned that you work with indigenous communities.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand on that, please? What kind of work do you do with the indigenous community?
Sure. So I was previously a director at a nonprofit called El Puente Foundation, which was born out of this company that was very much embedded in the psychedelic space. And they were looking for ways to do good and to embody this concept of reciprocity within the industry. So there's this acknowledgement that we're working with substances, the plant-based ones like ayahuasca or peyote, cactus, and others, or psilocybin mushrooms, that have an origin, and that by the very nature of us becoming more involved with this, it can be quite extractive, whether it be the extraction of knowledge and tradition and resources and actual physical bioculture, the actual plants themselves.
Hmm.
We're starting to harvest them and work and make these substances. For example, peyote, cactus in North America, is becoming endangered.
Hmm.
So this is because we're over harvesting the cactus, and it takes many years for them to grow back. And so this is where this element of reciprocity comes in. And El Puente Foundation essentially is on this mission to promote bioculture preservation and contribute to forest regeneration efforts in the Brazilian Amazon basin. And so El Puente makes investments into communities and organizations and projects that are owned and operated by indigenous peoples that are living on these territories that have sacred plant medicines, and that they themselves work with these plants. So namely in Brazil, you see ayahuasca communities and the indigenous that are primarily using ayahuasca as their medicine. And
Hmm.
so I have been to the Brazilian Amazon a couple of times on behalf of this organization, to start up the projects, to meet with the communities, to learn from them, to be part
Hmm.
of their tradition, and just be in a deep and humble space of listening to what it is that they actually need right now and how we can best support them from their perspective, not from our perspective. So a lot of times in philanthropy, and there's this sort of top down, oh, we know we're doing this, but we're going to help them by doing XYZ, and like help, it doesn't have
Hmm.
this element of real support from the inside out. And so I learned so much just by being there, by understanding what the actual needs are today for these communities, and how we can weave reciprocity into our own practice with these medicines in the ways that they do so themselves and the ways that they share with the world. And so it's given me a lot of insight, and I do like to weave this concept of reciprocity in my integration work that I do for others.
I'm wondering. Just curious, you said you learned so much from them. What are some of the things, the most important things you think you learned from them while doing
So,
the work?
yeah, one of the things that I learned that I think we can all apply into our relationship with medicine and with substance and with altered states more broadly is we're actually, instead of approaching this as just, how can I do this to help myself, to help heal my own traumas or issues, or how can I be more creative? How can I be a better leader? How can I do best and succeed? There is this very strong element, emphasis on the I, on the individual. And
Mm.
what I've really learned with these communities is that this medicine, the work that they do is actually an offering. It's a way of being in service to the relationships that are in their world, whether they be with their families, their communities that they live with, or most importantly, the natural world. So what is this offering that they're making back to nature? What is this offering that they're giving to make the world a better place? And it's a fundamental shift in perspective on why they're working with these substances and these medicines and these traditions. It's not just for the service of I or self, it's for society. How can we affect society in a better way? So,
I love it so much. Oh my God. I feel like this world has become so much about me, more, more, more. What I am so selective about people these days. I'm not gonna let you in into my life unless you make my life better. And that's very overwhelming because there's so much of that in the world right now. And I feel like this is such an important message that we need to hear from the indigenous community. I feel like this is the ancient tradition, the ancient wisdom, right? Telling us that go into healing so you can be a healthy cell in the body of the earth.
hmm.
Heal for the whole,
Mm-hmm.
because that's your duty and responsibility. You are part of the whole. So if you're just you, me, consume, consume, and that's 2023 that we have, right? And oh, I love it that I asked you that question, and I love what you said. Is there anything else that you want to share from that?
Mm. No, I think that's a really beautiful way to sum up for me what integration really is. So,
Mm.
integration for me is this transformation from I to we to us to all, one
Mm.
again, but one not
Mm.
being I, one being the one,
Yes.
right? So it's it takes time to get there. That
Oh,
takes time. But I really feel that that's the way. The way is to go in that direction with integration. And I truly hope that people can resonate with that.
and isn't that what a psychedelic drug helps you do? It helps you dissolve the ego mind so that you become, not become, but go back into that space, all the way back from where you're watching.
Mm.
And then you have that perspective on everything. It doesn't always happen, as I understand, right? Not for everybody. The
Yeah,
ego death.
it doesn't happen for everyone and for every time. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but you make a very beautiful illustration of how it's not becoming, but going back to get that perspective
Mm-hmm.
of our nothingness, right?
Yeah. Because
Um,
ultimately, this is who we are right here watching.
mm,
I love it. Amanda, I want to ask you, what is your message to the world?
mm. I said this before, but it still rings really true always for me. It's to say that that medicine that we seek is always within us.
Mm. I love it.
Mm.
That is very beautiful. And one last question. If somebody who's watching is curious about medicine work, psychedelics, your work, how can they find you? How can we find you? How can we listen to your talk, lecture, whatever you do? Let's.
I would love to hear from your watchers, your listeners, especially if you have stories around integration, if you're keen to learn more about how this works. I have my website, which I can send to you, amandaeftimio.com. I also have a newsletter on Substack called Healing Beyond Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I write twice a month all about integration with tools and techniques. It's sort of my musings, and it's a combination of research, but also interviews and stories from real people who are integrating and how they're doing it in a really meaningful way. And yeah, if people want to work with me one-on-one or for their retreat center, or you're a coach or facilitator and you're looking to deepen the integration practice, I host retreats. I'll be doing one in November in Portugal, and more ongoing.
Thank you so much, Amanda. This was an amazing conversation. I learned so much, and I really love your message. Thank you for coming up here and your time and your beautiful heart.
Oh, thank you, Marta.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love M Podcast. If you found it valuable, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more content on personal well-being. Stay blessed. I love you.